Hello and welcome to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to take you back to April 2008. Then Senator Barack Obama famously said that he wasn't surprised about the country folk getting frustrated because they quote unquote cling to their guns and religion, right? I bring that up as a backdrop to this whole controversy with Jason Aldean and try that in a small town and those lyrics in all of this. It has to be seen in that light because really what's going on is another war aspect of the war on religion. Now, first of all, if you look at the lyrics and you live in a small town, he's correct, right? There was a time, however, in that we did take care of our neighbors, that neighborhood and community transcended what ethnicity you were, what religion you were, where you came from. You were part of the fabric of the community, and we all took care of each other, right? But to say that this is pro-gun and pro-violence harkens back to me to the Obama comment, which I think was a very legitimate comment, which was the way they see the country or working class or flyover country is they are stupid. We're stupid, and we cling to our guns and our religion. And this is really the same trope or the same argument that they're making. So you have Sheryl Crow and all these other people saying that he's promoting violence. He's not promoting violence. This is another version of the Democrats basically saying if they don't like something, they want to cancel it. Now, to America's credit, from what I can see, the song is number one, number two on the Billboard parade. It's gone up 1,000%. Good for America. But I want to give a quick, different perspective, right? Not only is this anti-religion and another aspect of that, and by the way, as an aside, if you remember back then, I was around, then candidate Hillary Clinton accused Barack Obama of being an elitist for that comment. So said the basket of deplorables, Mrs. Clinton, who I just find that to be so hypocritical. But the larger conversation here has to be about right and wrong. And that's the conversation that the left doesn't want us to have, right? Black Lives Matter violence during the 2020 elections was okay, but lyrics are not. Where's the violence, right? Teaching gender fluidity and gender transition and grooming is okay, but it's not okay if I protest that my daughter doesn't want to change in the locker room or bathroom with someone who is a male but identifies as a woman. That's not okay. Slavery today, when we're talking about human trafficking, we're talking about child pornography, is not okay, is okay today. But slavery 300 years ago not only is not okay, it's the original sin and it colors everything, and we're all racist now. That's what we're being taught. So the real question is there right and is there wrong? And that's why this is against religion, because religion provides that foundation. And I don't care what denomination you are. I don't care if you're Christian. I don't care if you're Jewish. I don't care if you're a Muslim. List all the religions. It doesn't matter to me. I am not supporting one religion over another. The other reason this is anti-religious is they don't want the ultimate question asked. Does evil exist? Because the first thing is, does right and wrong exist? Or is everything relative, right? Is one man's terrorist another man's freedom fighter? So everything is relative and there is no right or wrong. That's what the argument is that's being put out. And because it really doesn't hold water, because there is right and wrong, that's what they don't want you to see. That's what they don't want you to talk about. Now, I do subscribe to Justice Potter Stewart. When asked about defining pornography, he said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Right and wrong is the same thing. The real question is there evil? Because if there's right and wrong, then there has to be evil in the world, and which there is. By the way, to the Democrats, the conservatives are evil. I mean, I understand how you all see us. I get that, right? But child mutilation, how is that not evil? Child sex trafficking, how is that not evil? And there are plenty other examples that I can give you, and I can go on a further rant. But understand that this whole controversy with Jason Aldean really is viewed in that context that maybe didn't start with Obama, but that's where the fabric started being ripped apart. So keep buying those songs. And he's right. Try all that crap in a small town and see how far that gets you. We'll give you a really good welcome. No problem. Stay tuned for the main show, folks. We'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin with my lovely co-host,
Erica Reddick.
Yes, you are. Hi, Erica.
Hi. Hello.
Let's jump right in, shall we?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay.
I'm ready to jump in.
So,
Speaking of jumping
so
in.
am I. Speaking, you know what? I want to end where we ended the last show. That interview on human trafficking and child sex trafficking with Jaco Boyens is one of the most moving interviews we've ever done. Folks, if you haven't seen it, we're up on Rumble, we're up on Facebook, we're up on Twitter, we're on YouTube.
All the socials.
But all the socials. What I really want to draw attention to, though, because people think about immigration, illegal immigration, immigration policy, all of those things, all of which are important, but under the radar is this whole sort of human trafficking, child sex trafficking issue, which for some reason, I mean, it should be bipartisan. And
You'd think so. You'd think so.
Yeah, I would think a lot of things that are not, but this one's such a serious issue. I do want to focus on Texas Governor Abbott because within the last couple of weeks, he signed some major legislation protecting the border, and they established that floating barrier in, I think it's the Rio Grande River. Yep. And now the Biden administration is suing Texas.
Yep. That's right. Yeah. That's right. They want to sue over Operation Lone Star. So this is where basically Governor Abbott and the Texas legislature has said, you know what? If the federal government is not going to protect our borders, if you're not going to protect Texas and American sovereignty, then we're going to. And so, they're suing, trying to make them take this floating border barrier out of the Rio Grande.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, there's an article I'm reading. Biden administration sues Texas over floating border barriers used to repel migrants. So, again, it comes down to states' rights to protect their own borders versus the federal government, right? And the federal government is using the ability to regulate bodies of water and what you can do in a body of water as a means to circumvent the will of the people of Texas.
Well, and
am I getting that right?
Well, that's what, one of the criticisms that we've had, particularly Benjamin and I did a mini documentary last year. We went to Del Rio and highlighted the fact that the border barrier, which is basically just a chain link fence with a bunch of holes in it, is actually, 30 or 50 yards away from the Rio Grande River. So by the time you're already in America, by the time there's a border. And so the complaint is that this border barrier and the razor wire that they've put on the Rio Grande and that they're paying to folks who have land on the Rio Grande River, they're saying, it's endangering migrants. Okay. So notice again, the conflation of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants with migrants, right? Well, here's the deal. If you want to say that we're worried about the protection of asylum seekers or migrants, then why aren't they going to the border crossing where they should be going rather than crossing the Rio Grande River? I mean, that just
And by the way, let me add something to that. What most people don't know, right? The Border Patrol now has an online application.
Yeah.
Which if you really want to come into the country legally, and frankly, most of the illegals are using that application anyway, where there's really no security checks.
That's correct.
Right. So Customs and Border, like CBP, Customs Border Patrol, right, has an application. Folks, don't believe me, as usual, look it up. So this is again a political agenda trying to circumvent a state just so, because I think the Biden administration, what did he promise Spain and Mexico? 14 million uh, immigrants or people would immigrate from Hispanic countries during his 4 years of administration,
Wow.
right?
Oh yeah. Well,
Oh,
that's
you didn't
no.
catch it?
Oh,
Don't you remember that one?
I that doesn't surprise me. When we're seeing 100,000 people a month crossing the border or having encounters with Border Patrol, and that's just who they're encountering. That's the number of people that they are picking up.
That they're catching or that they're right.
Exactly. And
Right.
so that's not even who's getting across the river illegally unobstructed.
So a friend of mine who is in Customs and Border Patrol, right? And I have lots of friends in high places,
Yeah.
right? Which, I'm not important, but all of them are. Said we functionally have no southern border
Correct.
right now, right? And the flow into the country is out of control. It's not just the people, right? They like to put this in terms of humanity, or they had a whole cage thing under the Obama administration and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? But it's the drugs that are
That's
coming
right.
in. It's not just the people. It's the human trafficking. It's the drugs that are coming in. It's the cartels that the minute you say the word terrorist, people go, oh, there you go, you're a conspiracy theorist. But if you're letting people in without checking and you don't know where they are when they're in here, right? And all you see is the stories in the news isolated here or there about this one who got in and this person or murdered this person. They were kicked out 12 times and they got back in. Sounds like it's got a system that's working for me. So look, kudos to the governor of Texas. Kudos to the state that are working with the governor, because there is an intrastate or interstate pact.
Yes.
Pact, right, that they're now put together. Yep. But so the Justice Department, however, filed a 9-page lawsuit in federal district court in Austin.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And the river buoys violate a longstanding federal law that governs structures in navigable waterways. So using a technicality to basically say, screw you to, the state of Texas or illegal immigration. So my attitude is, Governor Abbott, if you're listening, keep busing those migrants to the sanctuary cities, especially like Martha's Vineyard. That was a really priceless one.
Well, and one of the quotes Governor Abbott I've heard is, see you in court, Mr. President, which I absolutely love. And I think really the most important one of the pieces of legislation that has passed the Texas legislature is defining the cartels as terrorist organizations. And, I'm always cautious about giving too much power to the police state or too much power to law enforcement because, I'm one of these, this is where my libertarian hackles kind of stand up and I go, ugh, I want to be careful.
Wait a minute.
But
wait a minute. In today's day, look, I can appreciate libertarian tendencies, right? My attitude is, I don't want the government telling me what to do. Leave me alone. Right? If the government leaves me alone, I'll leave them alone.
Right.
But in today's state, are you really lamenting and are you really concerned with too much power in law enforcement?
So this is what I'm saying. So these are things that tend to concern me. So I always want there to be an opportunity to reconsider these things later on. But I actually love that these cartels are being called and defined as terrorist organizations now. And that's one thing that the federal government has been unwilling to do. And when I have like you said, I have family in Border Patrol. And when I hear stories like, and this, there has been a humanitarian crisis on our border for years. And they've just, that was.
Thank you, President Obama.
And their lies about the border are one of the biggest reasons this is why I'm wearing my I used to be a liberal shirt today, because I remember in the car listening to the news. I'm going to go off a little bit here. I was
Wait a minute. I'm gonna.
listening to the news say, "Oh, there's no crisis at
You
the
say you're gonna
border.
go off.
There's no crisis at the border." And I was like, "Oh my God, I literally just got told a story by my family where the cartels, so what, if you don't live in Texas or a border state, a lot of people don't realize it's traditionally a very porous border, okay? So people do work, and I don't mean in a bad way. Like, there's border crossings, people come across to work, people go to school. It's very much a blended community in a lot of places along the Texas-Mexico border. And so when you hear about the cartel just coming across and mowing down hundreds of women and children and men just getting ready to cross the border to go to work and go to school and get stuff done. These are terrorists. And
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me interrupt you. I have not heard of an incident where on the Mexican side of the border, where there were people getting ready to cross the border that were mowed down or gunned down or murdered by the cartels. You're telling me that that's happened? I'm not telling you that you don't, that's not truthful, but if I haven't heard of it, I guarantee you 99% of America hasn't heard of it, and I have not heard that.
Exactly. And that was why when I'm listening to NPR lie to the American people and say Donald Trump is a racist and there's no crisis at the border, and I'm like, I just heard a story literally last week where hundreds of people were murdered by the drug cartels just because they do it as a way to try to control people and manipulate the government, manipulate the people into going along with things. There was story after story that's not covered by the mainstream media of, oh God, when was it? A couple of years ago, there was a cartel leader that got picked up by the police. Okay, so the police actually had the nerve to go and they were able to pick up this cartel leader. And then the gang came around, freaking started murdering up the police and killing people and killing civilians. And then the civilians basically revolted against the police and made them give up the cartel leader. But you don't hear these stories. So the cartels are literally using terrorist tactics to control and manipulate the Mexican population to allow for this stuff to go on. And you never hear about it on the news.
Well, I certainly don't. And look, the cartels control Mexico. The Mexican government does not.
That's
and
right.
I think anyone who's familiar with politics understands that. But I want to go back to something else you talked about, which was your concern about law enforcement having too much power. So there's a story in the news about the LA Police Department, and the superintendent basically told the police officers, because there's union negotiations and the LA council is hostile to the police and police enforcement, basically said to them, quote, go somewhere, in other words, leave LA, go somewhere that respects the work you do, right? So I'm not concerned about too much law enforcement at this point, because if I have to choose between like the Democrats and law enforcement, I go with law enforcement. And let's not forget something. Los Angeles, which I believe is the second largest police department in the country behind New York City, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Chicago's bigger, but I don't think so.
It's LA.
Right? Okay. LA has lost since 2019 over 1,000 police officers who have either retired or left, right? So they're down 10%. This is against the backdrop of a spike in homelessness in LA, a spike in crime in LA. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, 30% of all homeless in this country are in California. So, Governor Newsom, I hope you're running for president, because you should run based on your record in California.
Oh my God.
But as far as concern with law enforcement having too much power, the pendulum goes both ways. But right now, the police are not allowed to do their job. And their job, right, they're law enforcement. Their job is to enforce the laws, right? So whether it's laws on the border, but you have the federal government who is intervening for political reasons against a governor, against state laws. You have law enforcement, and then you brought up the courts, right? So the government is now using the courts. And I find this to be incredulous to me because on the one hand, you have the Biden administration and the liberals basically saying, don't trust the Supreme Court, overrule the Supreme Court, expand the court. But, right? I mean, am I missing something?
Yep. Nope. Yep.
Right? So they're saying expand the court, all that other stuff. So they're saying, it's incredible to me that what they're really doing. And yet they're using the courts as they see fit. Yet there's this whole concept now called popular constitutionalism. And basically, it's been around for a while, but there's a Harvard professor, so he must be right.
Oh, Harvard.
And his name is Mark Tushnet. Now, if this were a comedy show, I could really do a riff on the name, but, because, Jewish tush, all that stuff. But, he certainly seems like he's an ass based on what he's putting forward. But that's a different discussion. But basically, they're saying, right, because we're going back to the whole court thing, is they're basically saying that and they're calling it now a MAGA Supreme Court, right? So they're trying to wait a minute. So you're trying to delegitimize the courts by saying that because of their mistaken interpretation and we need to restore democracy. And their argument is that according to the Constitution, the courts do not have exclusive authority to interpret the Constitution.
What?
How do you like them out?
What?
That's the argument. Look up popular constitutionalism and look up, Mark Tushner.
Then who does?
Who's a Harvard professor. The Constitution is pretty clear. Folks, if you go to Article 3 of the Constitution, right, and I can read it for you, since I prepared for this, right? Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 says the following. The judicial power shall extend to all cases, note the word all, in law and equity. So they already knew we were going to devolve into diversity, equity, and inclusion. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution. I mean, what part of that don't you understand, ladies and gentlemen?
They don't care. First of all, they don't care what the words say. They don't care what the words mean. Right. If they're not getting their way, it's whatever it is illegitimate, right? Like that is going to be, that is just like all of the candidates or all these people went from being anti-vaccine to pro-vaccine when it could benefit them and they could control people. So they're going to be pro-constitution and pro-law enforcement when they control it. Just like they demonize law enforcement and demonize police and say that they're all a bunch of racist, sexist, homophobes, every istophobe there is in the book, until you have January 6th happen. And then, our poor law enforcement, look at how mean people were to them. Like, dude, you do not care about these people.
Wait. Are you talking about the FBI plants in the January 6th crowd, or are you talking about the regular law enforcement?
All of it. They don't.
Sorry, I had to put that in
there. No, it's
there.
true though. That's the thing, is they don't care. They just lie and make stuff up so they can lather up their base to go out and spread more hatred and division. It is.
All right. I want to.
There is no truth anymore.
I want to come back to that. We're getting the high sign that we need to go make some money and take a break. But this is sort of a harbinger to the 2024 election.
Yeah.
This is a harbinger to sort of what's really at stake there. But I think the war on the courts as an integral part of that is where we want to come back to. So, folks, we got to go make some money, being the true bourgeois capitalists that we are. Stay tuned. Eric and I will be right back.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out the show on WNTK and WUVR on the radio in New Hampshire. Just a reminder that you can also find us on social media. Some of the more spicy takes, and you might get a little bit more energy, and some of the things that we can't talk about on the radio. So you can find Of the People on Rumble. That's the best place. at Robert Chernin. Okay, so we're on Robert Chernin's channel on Rumble. And again, that's where you're going to find our spicy takes, our hot takes, things that you're not going to hear on the radio. We've got a YouTube channel too, you guys, but these days, YouTube, we're getting community guideline strikes left and right, even when we're telling the truth. So join us on Rumble. That's where the movement, the free speech movement, is happening. You can also find us on Twitter, Shorts on YouTube, the things that we can say. Great opportunities to share the message and keep people engaged. Twitter, it's RB Chernin to get Robert. For me, it's Erica Reddick. That's ERICKAREDIC, because I know y'all spell my name wrong. I know you do. It's okay. I love you anyway. I love you. So find us on social media, get those spicy takes on Rumble. And again, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to all these social media channels. Help us fight the big tech overlords and make sure this message gets shared.
Hello, and welcome back to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin with my lovely co-host, Erica Reddick.
Hi, Robert.
Erica, before we went to break, we were getting hot and heavy about judicial reform and the hypocrisy of the Democrats. But I want to frame this for you.
Yeah.
Or for us, or for our listeners. I want to frame this. You know, we have an election, obviously very important, as all presidential elections are, coming up in 2024.
Yep.
And really, I think more and more people, even our guest last show, Jaco Boyen, said that the silent majority is a ridiculous concept. And I would argue, honestly, the silent majority is waking up finally, right? The sleeping giant has, I think, woken up because people are fighting back, whether it's the parental rights organizations, whether it's the school choice organizations, whether it's, fighting back in media. And The Sound of Freedom, right? That movie is off the charts successful.
Oh my gosh. Well,
right?
And just really exposing the groomers too, the people who, anybody who's like, the conspiracy theories and blah. And I'm like, look at you trying to cover up and make excuses for child trafficking. That's interesting.
Exactly. But I want to frame this, right?
Okay.
Because this really comes down to what's at stake in the 2024 election.
Yeah.
And there really is such a dichotomy between the view of what does America stand for, right, and the American institutions, right? And there's this whole thing going on with Israel we're going to get to in the judicial reforms a little later in this segment, or perhaps next segment. But, I look at certain things as sort of benchmarks or sort of litmus tests, right? There's another article in the news, the Chico Unified School District, right?
Okay.
A judge, by the way, it was a Bush appointee judge, appeals court judge, ruled that the judge had no place in ruling on whether or not a school district could hide a child's identity, including gender transition, from the parents, right? And again, you get that whole case of gender affirming care, which is the biggest whitewashing of words.
Oh gosh.
Can you say whitewashing?
Oh yeah.
Am I allowed to use the word white?
Using euphemisms to try to cover up the butcher of children. Yes.
Right. So you look at that, right? And you try to understand the culture war, and even the words culture war, I think are inappropriate because the war is so much broader than that.
Yeah.
The 2024 election is for the heart and soul of America. I think anyone understands that, and you can look at the different candidates, but you look at this through the prism of the war on the courts, right? Because, right? I mean, when you look at this, the Biden administration is using the courts on a certain level when it suits them.
That's right.
And yet they're deriding the legitimacy of the court, right? Because it's the last of the three institutions.
Yep.
So what am I missing here? And I guess my real question is, where the hell's the outrage?
Well, this is,
so
the judge ruled that the judge didn't have the right to rule on a case. I mean, what was his excuse for that?
Judicial restraint. Hang on. It's, and unfortunately, folks, as you can tell, I am on the road, so I got to pull all this stuff up from places, because usually I am much better prepared than this. but let me
Well, I
just pull
think
this
the
one up.
the thing that you're speaking to, right, is just the constant undermining of all of our institutions. That is
that is exactly what I'm speaking
right.
to.
So we've already delegitimized the executive branch and the administrative state. The Congress has its worst approval ratings ever, is my understanding. They're in the single digits. So
Well,
everybody,
but so does all the institutions. FBI is down to about a 20% approval
I
rating.
mean, this is what
So so your chief law enforcement agency is down to about a 20% approval rating. What does that tell you about the tearing apart of the fabric of the country, right? Michael Savage famously said, borders, language, culture define a nation, right?
yep.
So border, we have no southern border. And frankly, if we weren't bound by the Atlantic and the Pacific, we'd have no borders there either. Canada, you're next.
Oh, it's already
Right?
happening. Vermont has
Language,
seen
we have
five,
no common
I think a
language.
5,000-fold increase in border crossing or border encounters in Vermont. I'm not sure what it is in New Hampshire, but
Yeah, hang on.
okay, got it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Keep going.
No,
Keep going.
it just you're right. If it wasn't for the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, we would have no borders. I would imagine every state along the northern border is having the same issues. They're coming from everywhere. And so language, I got to tell you, I don't know what it's like everywhere, but more and more here in Texas, I go to the store, I go to the restaurant, I go to the gas station. It doesn't matter where I'm going. Oftentimes, at least once or twice throughout the day, my encounters with people they can't speak English. They are only speaking Spanish. And I'm like, I live in America.
Right. And folks, let's be clear. We're not xenophobic. We're not saying that, speaking your native tongue is wrong. What we are saying is that without a common language, you lose the fabric of one of the things that binds together a nation, right? By the way, so going back to this, so this is what's that appeals court before? It's U.S. District Judge John Mendez said he was observing judicial restraint by dismissing the lawsuit from a parent against the Chico Unified School District, right? And basically said that that hid this girl's gender identity from the parents, and basically said that my hands are tied. The Supreme Court said I can't do that, which is a gross misinterpretation. So
that
if you look
not
up,
yeah, that is not an accurate interpretation of wow.
Right, and you juxtapose this, right, because it's this whole sort of mutilation of children. Forget about child sex trafficking, which don't forget about it. I mean, which is horrible. But the children that are here let's be honest. When you're growing up, there's all sorts of anxieties. There's all sorts of stress, and who doesn't like me, and I don't fit in, and am I pretty enough, and am I, am I tall enough, and am I smart enough? I mean, isn't that what everybody goes through? So we're going to take confused children,
normal
and
adolescence and puberty.
Right. So this girl in particular wanted to talk to her mom about that. She was confused. Basically the guidance counselor, if you remember that term, basically manipulated her into keeping her mom in the dark, right? And she would visit the girl's class regularly, right? I mean, so you're talking about, You're talking about grooming or proselytizing, right? And then instantly assigned her a gender identity. And then you juxtapose this with the amount of surgeries that are going on that are mutilation, and there's just no evidence for it. And yet that's what we're teaching our children. And those are the values, right? We're still under border language culture. So we're under culture.
Yeah.
Those are the values that are being taught. And it's okay to mutilate a child. And there's this guy in, what's his name? Blair Peters, Oregon Health and Science, who basically said that, quote unquote, I don't know if I can read this on the air, but you may have to bleep this one out, but basically said that there's no published research on genital operations on, quote, pubertally, I guess, suppressed adolescents, which are especially challenging on young males because their Private parts are have too little tissue to
That's
construct
right.
a right.
Yes. So what
So
happens is if you put young men,
you use
particularly on puberty
right,
blockers, their genitalia does not grow large enough
right,
or
right.
substantial enough to create a
There's that size. Are you bringing that size issue in again?
yes,
You bring,
literally.
I'm sorry.
There's not
I shouldn't
enough.
make a joke on such a
I
serious
know,
topic
but
because it's very serious.
that's the
But
thing is there's not enough to make a fake vagina. And so this is
right,
part of the whole thing is you cannot have informed consent by definition because these children have not had sex, they have not had an orgasm, they cannot have informed consent. I mean, they can't anyway because they're children, for God's sakes, but they cannot have informed consent because they haven't actually experienced or knowledge of the thing that they're going to miss out and lose out on if
right.
these things go underway. And now you have states like Vermont passing laws legalizing the kidnapping and genital mutilation of children. Literally, Vermont passed a law that said, if your state doesn't allow for mutilating your child,
come here, we'll do it for you.
and we won't go along with the extradition from the other states. We're not going to protect your child from these decisions that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives, no matter what.
And by the way, so this doctor, Blair Peters is his name, in Oregon, the part of the Oregon Health and Science University, said the following: "There's going to be a huge role for therapy during the surgery process. This is definitely something we're going to learn a lot more in the next 5 or 10 years as we're just doing increasing numbers of these cases." So my attitude is, and again, these are the things, folks, that are at stake in the next election because it's really the heart and soul of America. Is this okay with you guys?
We're doing
right?
scientific.
Why is it?
We're doing scientific.
No. Why isn't there mental health? Why isn't there mental health first? Why is there not mental health first?
We're literally doing scientific experiments on children, but then have movies come out like Sound of Freedom, and we're going to pretend like child trafficking isn't a thing. But then we're also going to admit out loud that we're doing scientific experiments on children, that we have no idea how it's going to affect them in the future. I mean, this is when oh my God, history is going to judge us so harshly for what we're doing to the most vulnerable population among us. It is talk about deplorables. Good golly.
I agree, but history will only judge us if we're victorious in this battle of good versus evil, right? Because the victors write history. Let's be clear.
That's right.
Right. So, again, I know this is a heavy topic. The Jersey side of me would have poked fun at a few things, but this is not a topic I can poke fun on at all, because it is so serious, and it really is. It's such a huge part of what's at stake in this whole culture war in these upcoming elections. So, folks, when you look into all of these issues, understand the bigger issue that's at stake here.
That's right.
Which is, what kind of country do you want to live in? And what's being foisted upon you is they're delegitimizing institutions as a way of, because you're really talking about the ultimate in relativism. There is no right. There is no wrong. Right. And, that's that old argument that one man's freedom fighter, terrorist, is another man's freedom fighter, which frankly is a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
It all centers on the children. As Jacob Boyan said, the children are the next generation. And I know you're not supposed to make this analogy, but I will. I mean, there's a reason that Hitler started the Hitler Youth Movement, right? I mean, you want to go after the youth because they're the most impressionable. If it's okay to parade in front of kids naked, if it's okay to take a normally confused state of a child who is growing up and doesn't understand sort of the world around them.
That's right.
And yet it's okay that they can, through gender affirming care, they can be proselytized, mutilated, change their gender, And parents have no right to know
That's right.
what's going on with their child, because again, the argument that they make is, well, there could be abuse at home, or there could be, I mean, that's such a
Oh my,
whitewash of
they
things.
make up so
Right.
many excuses. This is
Right.
the
So wait, there's abuse at
manipulation.
home. So that, right. There's abuse at home. So the parents can't know. So we're going to abuse them in the schools. But that's okay. And you guys can't know about that.
I mean, that's what's so outrageous to me is there is this manipulation, this emotional manipulation that is so disgusting to me. Oh, if you don't do it, the kid's going to commit suicide. Well, it's a 50-50 shot to begin with. And it's pre or post surgery, pre or post transition, 50-50 chance that they're going to commit suicide. So why are we using that to manipulate people? And how is it, honestly, I blame Generation X, and I blame the baby boomers for this. We can say how millennials and these Gen Yers are a bunch of crazies and how dare they do stupid stuff. It's our fault. We raised this generation. The baby boomers and Generation X have raised these people without any sense of duty or responsibility or truth, justice, reasonableness. We are literally allowing the next generation to decide, what is true, what is false. And again, it's people who are already young people who are hormonal, going through puberty, who have no idea what is going on, and we're telling them that they're in charge and that they're in the best position to make decisions. Oh my God.
Yeah, you can't vote, you can't serve in the military, but you can decide what gender you want to be because you're confused growing up. Well, by the way, if you had paraded all these naked people in front of me when I was a kid, and whose gender is what, I mean, I would have been confused too. We're all confused at that point.
That's right.
So they're going after the most vulnerable, which is again, an abomination to me. It's an infamia. Look, this all comes down to the 2024 election, and this all comes down to that really the judiciary, the courts, are the last battlefront of legitimacy in the system, in the constitutional system that's left. I talked about it in the monologue. I'm going to talk about it now. I do want to go to break. We're going to come back, right afterwards and really delve into that, because the same battle, sort of inverted, is now going on in Israel. And it's the same battle here, but from sort of the opposite side of the spectrum, which is an interesting thing. And if you want to see what's going to happen here, folks, stay tuned. We will be right back to talk about that. Hi, I'm Robert Chernin.
And I'm Erica Reddick.
And we are Of the People. You can find us on Rumble. You can find me on Twitter at RB Chernin. And
I am at Erica Reddick.
Look us up. You'll be entertained.
That we guarantee.
Absolutely. She's never wrong.
Ever. Just ask my husband.
Hello, and welcome back to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin with
Erica
my lovely co-host.
Reddick.
So I know we've been all over the place today. I want to focus us on, because I honestly believe the 2024 election is so important. Between now and then, though, the last battlefront in a constitutional republic is already engaged. And that is, they've gone after laws. They went after law enforcement, right? They're going after the judiciary.
That's right.
You already see it. We talked about it in the earlier segment, where they're now saying this, what do they call it? Let's see, popular constitutionalism. Mark Tushnet. It's a net, not a man, but you get the idea. Harvard professor basically says that courts don't have the exclusive authority. You have the Biden administration that's looking to circumvent the courts, certainly even the affirmative action decision, even what did Biden just came out with, that now they're not going to forgive the student debt. They're going to write it off. didn't quite understand the difference
Oh, yeah.
between it. But in any event, they're looking to get around the courts, and that really is the last bastion. As we talked about, Article 3 of the Constitution is very clear. The courts are the final arbiter. Now, truthfully, what they're really trying to do is just say, don't listen to the courts.
Yep. Delegitimize. Yep.
Right. So if you cannot, if you can, under the heading of if you can't beat them, join them, it's slightly different. If you can't beat them, delegitimize them. Right. So either we're going to pack the courts and expand the court, or we're going to delegitimize them. Right now, and that's the other reason 2024 is so important, because the likelihood is in the next presidential term, you'll have certainly one, maybe two Supreme Court appointments based on the age, whether it's Justice Thomas, whether it's Justice Alito, right?
Yep.
I mean, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, but I want to juxtapose this as to what's going on in Israel right now. And I, again, try not to stray too far from our borders and those kinds of things. But right now there is massive unrest in Israel because of, relatively speaking, a innocuous change, or a proposed innocuous change to the Israeli judicial powers. And understand, folks, we have a constitution. There's two different things here. The U.S. has a constitution. Israel does not, right? We have checks and balances. Israel does not. So it is, the judiciary is unfettered in Israel. They are allowed to, and the real issue is there's something called a reasonableness standard in Israel that the courts have used to nullify cabinet appointments, to nullify laws, to have the attorney general, unelected by the people. So they've proposed a law, which I believe is now being signed as of earlier in the week, that basically limits the judiciary's power, because in this country, the power, in theory, flows from the people upward, right? Through your elected officials. And if you don't like something, you can change it. And we can talk about sort of how the pendulum swings, but the Democrats get in power. They put in all the judges and people they like. The Republicans get in power. They put in all the people and the judges they like. And over time, at least in theory, at least until Obama, right, and Biden, in theory, it balances out in the middle over time. And that is sort of consistent with the checks and balances as the founders envisioned it.
Yeah.
It's certainly consistent with between the branches and within the branches. Israel doesn't have that.
That's right.
All Israel is saying is, let's be beholden to the people through the Knesset. And here's the point. When you don't agree with something right now, political violence is the means to achieve the end. You saw it with BLM, Black Lives Matter. You're seeing it with the riots. They're trying. So a political party, there used to be two parties, right? Labor and Likud, right?
In Israel.
You've seen it now. And so judges are allowed to select other judges in Israel. Did you know that?
That's what I think people, it's important for us as Americans to understand the really big differences in the way that Israel's government is set up. So it's not like here where the executive branch proposes the judge selection and then the legislature has to approve them, right? So checks and balances. The judges in Israel select their successors. So it would be like if, Neil Gorsuch,
and they approve cabinet ministers.
And so it would be as if Neil Gorsuch, Clarence Thomas, all these people got to pick their own successors, and then no one has any say about it. The parliament then doesn't get to approve those successors. And so there's a feeling by parliament that there is this ruling judiciary that is very left-wing, very left-leaning, and remains left-leaning all of the time.
And you're 100% correct. But they are unaccountable to the people or the politicians.
Correct.
That's the key issue. And what people need to understand, I mean, if you look at the battles going on here in the efforts to delegitimize the court, we have a constitution, right? If you're going to follow the rules, you follow the constitution, right?
Yep.
Now, if you don't like the outcome, you're going to say, don't follow the Constitution and this whole nonsense of popular constitutionalism, which frankly is a piece of crap. But
you still have it.
Well, it's in vogue because they want to, they're now calling it the MAGA, right? Supreme Court.
God.
But in Israel, the judges are not accountable. The judges the Knesset can pass a law. Someone files a lawsuit and the courts in Israel deem it to be unreasonable. So how would you like to have your standard? There's no constitution to refer back to, and which is what we're going to end. By the way, that's what we're going to end up with if we go down that rabbit hole, which is we will have a written constitution, but if no one listens to it or there's not agreement that it should be the law of the land, you end up like Israel, where you have judges be the final arbiter until, again, no one listens to the judges, and then people go for their guns, right? And again, I'm not advocating violence. I'm just telling you that that's where this ends up. The attorney general, hostile to the government, and was appointed by someone who opposes Netanyahu. So you create this cauldron of I guess vitriol, really, right?
Yeah.
And there are no standards here. So understand, people, the judicial reform debate that's going on in Israel affects us because it should allow you to see where we're heading towards if we delegitimize the courts. Look, Antonin Scalia, the late Supreme Court justice, said that if you are doing your job properly as a judge and you're adhering to the law and you're applying the law as the Constitution dictates, you're not going to like all the decisions you make. That's right. The way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be one set of laws for everybody, and you're supposed to have this common interpretation. So when you look at what's going on in these judicial reforms, and I hope people pay attention to it in Israel. Obviously, it's our ally in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the Middle East.
That's right.
And folks, I'm telling you now, as goes Israel, goes the United States in terms of Western world, in terms of human rights, in terms of the rights and privileges that you enjoy. I know it seems like a stretch, but it's really not. You have to understand that Israel is coming at it from Israel what Netanyahu is trying to do is make Israel more like U.S. law, which is to establish a body of law because there is no constitution in Israel.
Well, and this is, Robert, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But for me, when I look at Israel, it's very challenging to see because so they have a parliament, right? But it doesn't look like parliament like you see in other countries. It is a multi-party system, and people try to say,
"Oh, that's a whole different argument." I agree.
Yeah. People try to say, "Oh, it's just an apartheid state and all this stuff," which is just outrageous because it's actually. My understanding is it's multiple parties. You have to build a coalition government. There are Palestinians and Arabs. It is not just Israelis that are part of parliament. It's Arabs. It's everybody that lives in Israel. So you have to build this cross section of competing interests to build a coalition to try to get anything done in the first place. So it's almost like it's designed for all legislation and government operations to just be stymied.
Well, so let me simplify. I do not claim to be an expert on Israel, although I have plenty of friends who I would certainly be willing to bring on the show who know way more than I do. Full disclosure.
Yeah.
The first issue is to simplify this, we have an issue. We have a system of checks and balances here, right? At least in theory.
Yeah.
The founders created a system that was not only checks and balances between the three branches of government, but even within the branches of government, right? Certainly within the legislative branch, checks and balances between the upper chamber and the lower chamber,
That's
right?
right.
The bicameral, the House, which is, the House is supposed to be
Ambition to a check
the
ambition. That's
well,
what
the House
said.
is supposed to burn hot. It burns with passion. It's directly elected by the people. The Senate was, as originally formulated, was the cooling chamber, if you will, and that was supposed to be elected by each state legislature. Obviously,
changed that.
Was it the 19th Amendment? I don't recall, but whatever amendment it was made it directly elected, which I think, frankly, was a mistake because it took away some of that checks and balances. The key here is Israel has no checks and balances in their system, and the judiciary reigns supreme. And that's really all that's going on here. With regards to the multi-party system, right? We have I would call it, bipolar is really what it is. And I'm not invoking the medical term, although perhaps with our political system, we have a two-party system. That two-party system, for all of its problems, has created stability over the years. It's very hard for a third-party candidate. Israel initially had essentially a two-party system, which was the, Labor and Likud. They were the liberals, but that was, marginal. Right. Now they have, I think there are 26 parties represented in parliament. Don't hold me to the number, but it's a large number. And so each party now, and I think the change, and again, I think it was in the 1990s when they changed, fractional representation. So you have a system now in Israel. Right. Without you have a system without a constitution. You have a system without checks and balances where the judges reign supreme and where the judges get to nullify laws, nullify appointments.
That's what. Right. How can a country not have a constitution? How can a country not have a constitution or some kind of a foundational document that says this is what we agree to, or this is. When we talk about culture, as an example, in the United States, we have so many different cultures in that there's no one race or background, but we had a culture that was built around our Constitution, which said, our rights come from God. You have freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, all of these things. That's our culture here in the United States. Regardless of your race, color, creed, language, whatever it is, our culture is built up around this Constitution of and this culture of freedom, of rights and responsibilities. And so if you have none of that as any kind of a foundation for a multinational country like Israel, how do you get anything done? How do you protect people? How do you...
Wait a minute. We had on Dr. Bruce Abramson, who said that, even dictators have elections. Even country. I mean, it's not a question of whether you have a foundational document or not. I mean, England doesn't have a constitution either, right? I mean, they have the Magna Carta. I mean, different legacy documents that guide their principles, right? That form their government. But most countries don't have a constitution, and the ones that do, who follows them? I mean, I'm not a scholar, clearly. If anything's evident after this show is I am not a scholar. But and Ben, that's a good clip for you. So, but like elections, okay, you can have a constitution. Who follows it? The thing with Israel is they've had basically 74 years of an unaccountable judiciary, self-perpetuating judiciary that picks their successors. And all that's trying to be done here is to rein that back in a little bit, right? And what do you see? You see political violence in the streets because now it's acceptable. Political violence and justifies the means. In any event, more to follow on that.
Always wrong,
folks.
We were starting.
This was a wide-ranging one.
Ooh.
If you have any questions, if you want me, Robert C. at asicfund.org. Erica, where can they get you?
Generallyirritable@gmail.com.
Yeah. And she's not generally irritable today. Today she was a savior. So
I don't know. I'm freaking fired up.
Exactly. Folks, you have been listening to Of the People with Robert Chernin and my lovely co-host, Erica Reddick. We will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
It was always burning since the world